I woke up in the ER with a monitor beeping over my head, and no one beside me, no mother, no sister, just an empty chair and a nurse telling me, "She said you'd understand." Hi, I'm Lauren. A week ago, I had a minor stroke. But what hurt more than the numbness in my arm was realizing my own family had already signed away my rights while I was unconscious. They took my name off the deed, froze my accounts, and called it love. But I didn't disappear. I came back with proof. So, what do you do when the people who are supposed to protect you erase you instead? Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now let's start the story together. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was beige. Beige walls, beige sheets, beige tile ceiling humming under dim fluorescent light. The kind of sterile quiet that felt more like absence than peace. I blinked, and my left eye responded slower than the right. My mouth was dry. I tried to shift my body, but a sharp ache shot down my left arm and into my side. That's when I noticed the chair, the one beside the hospital bed, empty. No coat tossed across the back, no purse slung on the armrest, no styrofoam cup with a lipstick print. No sign anyone had been sitting vigil for me. Not for 5 minutes, not for 5 hours. Just that chair, waiting for a presence that never came. I turned my head, slow and unsure, my neck stiff, like it had been forgotten. A monitor beeped rhythmically somewhere above my head, announcing I was alive, even if my body hadn't caught up to the news. A nurse walked in, clipboard in hand, shoes squeaking just a little. She looked to be in her 30s, pale pink scrubs, hair pulled into a low, practical bun. Her eyes landed on mine, and her smile turned gentle, practiced. "You're awake," she said softly, like she was easing me into the idea. I tried to speak, but my voice came out cracked, like splinters from dry wood. "Where's my mom?" She hesitated, that single beat too long. "She left earlier, said you'd understand." Understand what? I didn't say it aloud, just swallowed it down like a pill with no water. I looked toward the tray near the bed, some gelatin, a sealed carton of juice, and a spoon still wrapped in plastic, untouched. The nurse adjusted the IV drip and made a note on her chart. "You've been out a few hours," she said, not unkindly. I nodded, though the motion made my head swim. I pressed my hand to my temple, trying to remember. The last clear thing was the car ride. Sitting beside my mother, her fingers tapping the steering wheel in even beats, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I told her I couldn't feel my arm. She said nothing, just kept driving. When we pulled up to the ER, I had to open the car door myself. She walked in beside me, one hand on my elbow, answering questions for me like I wasn't there. "Is she under stress?" the nurse at check-in had asked. My mother didn't even blink. She's always dramatic when she's tired. That sentence had clung to my ribs like a bruise ever since. I tried to speak that day, to say something, but the words wouldn't form. The room had tilted sideways and everything had gone black. Now here I was, awake, alone, and somehow emptier than when I lost consciousness. "Can I get my phone?" I asked, slowly, tasting the words like they might betray me. The nurse offered a polite shake of her head. "I believe your mother took your personal items. She said you'd be fine without them." Fine. I turned my gaze toward the hallway. A television down the corridor played a rerun of the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. A giant cartoon balloon floated across the screen, waving to a crowd that wasn't me. Somewhere, it was Thanksgiving. Here, it was just me, a tray of melting gelatin, and a chair with no story to tell. Later, when I swung my legs over the side of the bed, I felt the chill of the floor bite at my toes. The nurse tried to gently stop me, but I insisted. I needed to move, even if just to remind myself I could. I walked, slow, unsure, down the corridor toward the nurse's station. Every step echoed. I caught snippets of conversation as I approached. "Power of attorney's already signed." Prior episodes, maybe memory issues. My heart skipped. I froze behind the wall just before the station. Another voice responded, lower. It's already in the system. Her family said she's unstable. We've logged it. I stepped forward. Not fast, not loud, just enough to be seen. Excuse me, I said. Did you say power of attorney? The nurse at the desk flinched a little, then stiffened. I'm sorry, that's confidential information. I'm the patient, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That's about me. Her eyes flicked to the side, unsure. She didn't answer. I backed away, not trusting my legs. I made it to the wall and leaned against it, eyes staring at the floor tiles, trying not to cry. There were no tears anyway, just that dry, hollow throb in my chest. My mother didn't wait to see if I'd live. She didn't bring a charger. She didn't bring comfort. She brought signatures. Legal ink. She came long enough to sign me away. I whispered, to no one in particular, what did they do while I was unconscious? The chair back in my room still hadn't moved. Neither had the story it didn't tell. The folder they handed me looked more like something you'd use to carry cafeteria menus or sandwich coupons. Thin, folded unevenly, no label on the front. But inside, it didn't hold something harmless. It held pieces of me I didn't recognize, medical forms, printed notes, terms I'd never heard used in reference to myself. Cognitive dissonance, emotional fragility, possible prior episodes. I read those words sitting upright in the hospital bed, one hand bracing the thin file like it might bite. The nurse who passed it along didn't make eye contact. She just said, per request from your record, and vanished through the curtain. Outside, the ward had quieted. It was Thanksgiving morning, but you wouldn't know it unless you looked closely. Paper turkey cutouts were taped along the nurse station windows. Somewhere down the hall, someone was humming Silver Bells like they'd jumped a holiday ahead. But for me, time felt frozen, paused at a point between shock and something colder. I flipped the page again. My name was typed at the top, but the content read like it belonged to someone else. Patient exhibits signs of mild disorientation, it said. History of dramatized symptoms. Suggest emotional instability. Recommend family oversight. Family oversight. My jaw clenched. Vanessa used to call me resilient, like it was a charm she could use to excuse disappearing on me whenever I needed something real. You always bounce back, she'd say with a proud smile, as if I were a rubber band, not a person. I heard a quiet knock on the metal bed frame and looked up. He was young, mid-20s maybe, too clean-cut to have seen much of the world yet. His badge read Rami Ortiz, intern RN. He stood awkwardly at the foot of my bed, glancing around as if unsure whether he was allowed to be here. I just wanted to check how you were feeling, he said. I noticed your chart didn't match how you presented. Thought maybe you'd want to know that. I narrowed my eyes. You read it? He hesitated. I shouldn't have. But yes. And something's off. There are entries, notes about memory loss, delusions, but they weren't logged by attending physicians. One of the entries came from an account that doesn't belong to a staff member. I felt the air shift inside my chest. Whose account? He shook his head slightly, careful. It was added remotely. The metadata shows it was uploaded from outside the building. My throat tightened. I tried to keep my voice level. Can I see it? He nodded. I can print a copy when I do the next round. Then, quieter. I'll leave it under your meal tray. When he slipped out, I sat in silence, the paper folder still open in my lap. My fingertips tingled with that familiar feeling, anger trying to be calm. I thought about the date on the note. It was from 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago, I'd had my annual physical. The results were normal. My doctor told me I was in better shape than most people half my age. So who had decided I wasn't fine? The page under my tray came an hour later. It was folded twice and printed in faint ink, like a secret whispered too quietly to last. I unfolded it slowly. At the bottom, there was a line that read, POA filed, Vanessa Chen, signed Lauren Chen, dated 2 weeks prior. I stared at that signature like it was a stranger. It looked vaguely like mine, close enough to fool someone skimming, but there were things missing. The slant was too upright. The loop in the L was open, not closed. Whoever forged it didn't know I always tucked the bottom curve tight, like a tail hidden beneath a skirt. I pushed the tray away, reached for the hospital phone, and punched in my credit card company. "Please verify your name and zip code," the rep asked. I did. "And your date of birth?" "March 4th, 1988. A pause. Then, "Your account has been placed under restricted access. We'll need verification from the guardian on file before continuing." "What guardian?" "The person listed on your power of attorney." I hung up before my voice could crack. Then I called the front desk at my school. The secretary picked up cheerily. "Oh, hi, Miss Chen. Hope you're resting well. We received the medical note. You've got a substitute through winter break." I didn't send any note. I set the receiver down slowly and sat very still, watching the white tile floor beneath my feet. The air in the room shifted like someone had opened a window I couldn't see. A cold draft settled over my shoulders. That's when Ramey came back in. He didn't speak, just slipped a small folder onto the bed tray and nodded once before walking out. I opened it with cautious hands. Inside were names and phone numbers, Adult Protective Services, Legal Aid of Ohio, a law office scribbled Wells and Company, and at the bottom, folded once in half, was a crumpled yellow slip of paper, a lottery ticket. The ink was smudged, like it had passed through too many palms. I turned it over. Yesterday's date. I didn't remember buying it. It sat in my palm like something disposable, forgotten, like me. I stared at it for a long moment before whispering to the empty room, "It doesn't look like salvation. It looks like trash." But sometimes, trash holds the truth no one wants to admit was valuable. The shoes were too big. I'd stuffed paper towels into the toes, but they still flapped with every step like they weren't convinced I was ready to walk out. The hoodie Ramey had left was a faded navy blue, 2 sizes too large with sleeves that swallowed my fingers. But it was warm, and that morning, warmth was all I could ask for. No one stopped me. That was the most terrifying part. No nurse glanced up. No orderly came jogging down the hall with a clipboard. No voice called after me with concern or suspicion. I moved past the nurse's station, through the double doors, down the long hallway to the east exit. Every fluorescent light hummed above me like it was tired of trying. The linoleum floors didn't even squeak under my feet. Vanessa once joked, "You could walk out of a burning house and no one would notice. You were always the quiet one." Well, here I was, walking out, and she was right. No one noticed. Outside, the early morning air cut sharp against my face. November in Ohio was cold enough to remind you still had skin. I tightened the hoodie around my chin and scanned the east lot. Most of the spaces were empty, just a few night shift vehicles, a maintenance van, and then, tucked near the edge, a dusty blue pickup truck idling with the lights off. Ramey had said, "East lot, 6:30, blue truck, just go." I didn't look back. I opened the passenger door, slid inside, and kept my hands in my lap. The man behind the wheel looked like he hadn't slept much. Salt and pepper beard, wire-framed glasses, a coat that had seen more winters than I had. "You Lauren?" he asked. I nodded. "Good, I'm Al. Let's not talk till we're out of city limits." The ride was quiet. 2 towns over, we stopped at a diner that looked like it had been built with leftover bricks and bad intentions. The coffee was weak. The eggs were watery, but it was hot, and it was real. Al opened a worn leather briefcase and laid out a stack of papers between us. "This is the guardianship petition filed last week. Attached to it are 2 psychiatric evaluations. One's dated 3 months ago, signed by Dr. L. Kendricks." I looked up. "He's been dead 3 years, Al said before I could ask. The words didn't land so much as settle, like dust on a windowsill. She didn't just want to monitor you, he continued. She wanted you legally incapable of objecting. I asked the only question that mattered. Do they think I'm missing? He shook his head. They know exactly where you are. They just didn't want you back. A silence stretched between us, brittle and dry. You need to disappear, he said finally. Not forever, just long enough to build proof. I know a place. Not fancy, but safe. So that's how I ended up in a cabin tucked into the folds of the Smoky Mountains, Tennessee side. The air smelled of old pine and wet soil. The wood floors creaked like they were remembering every footstep that came before mine. There were no mirrors, no clocks. One heater in the wall ticked like a broken metronome. It was the kind of place built for waiting or forgetting. I opened the duffel bag Al had handed me at the truck stop. It held basic clothes, a battered laptop, a toothbrush, and, at the very bottom, an envelope marked Legal Personal in my father's handwriting. My breath caught. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside, his original will, 5 years old, listing me as the primary heir, and then another copy, revised, my name replaced, scratched out like a clerical error. Attached was a deed to the house I'd grown up in. My name was no longer there either. At the back of the envelope, folded tightly, was a page he'd started to fill out. A new amendment, unfinished, unsigned. He'd been planning to revisit it. Maybe he'd known something was off. Maybe he'd just run out of time. I closed the file and set it beside the small desk in the corner of the cabin. The Wi-Fi was patchy, but stable enough to search one thing. I opened the laptop, typed in my full name, and waited. No recent employment records, no credit activity, no public mentions, no alert. I tried a few variations. Lauren M. Chen, L. Marie Chen, nothing. I clicked through county records, state directories, anything that might whisper, "You were here." It was all blank. I didn't legally exist. The room felt colder after that. Or maybe I was just finally still enough to feel it. I stood up, walked to the window, and pressed my palm against the glass. Outside, the sky was low and silver, clouds hanging like breath you couldn't exhale. Then it happened. Snow, not fast, just a few flakes at first, drifting slow, casual, like ash falling from a memory. I watched them collect on the windowsill. "They erased me," I whispered, "but I'm still here." Behind me, the heater ticked, and ticked, and ticked. She wore beige like it was sympathy and smiled like she was mourning someone who wasn't dead. The live stream buffered for a second, then snapped into clarity. Vanessa standing at the center of a rented ballroom in downtown Columbus. Her makeup was soft, carefully done to appear untouched. The lights above the stage glinted off her pearl earrings, and her dress hung perfectly, like it had been steamed twice for good measure. Behind her, the words, "Serenity Fund," "Healing Through Truth," stretched across a velvet banner. My name wasn't anywhere on the screen, but I knew the story she was telling. "I started this foundation," Vanessa said, her voice steady with a slight tremble built in, "to honor my sister's battle with mental illness. It's a cause that is deeply personal to me. Too many families suffer in silence, unsure how to help." She paused, just long enough to let her lip quiver. "Sometimes," she continued, "the best way to love someone is to protect them from themselves." Applause. Applause that clinked against champagne flutes and echoed off ballroom walls lined with people in rented tuxedos. People who didn't know me, people who thought they did because they had heard her version. I sat in the cabin alone. The coffee beside me had gone cold. The room smelled of dust and cheap wood, the heater still clicking like a metronome against the silence. The laptop's webcam light blinked once. I opened the recording software. No notes, no script, just the truth. I looked straight into the lens. "My name is Lauren Chen. I am of sound mind and body. I am recording this to document what has been done without my consent, under the guise of care." My voice didn't shake. I listed the forged evaluations. I held up the medical file and pointed out the signature from a doctor who had been dead for years. I showed the power of attorney, dated 2 weeks before my stroke. I flipped to the note filed from an external IP address, my sister's. "They called it love," I said softly, "but love doesn't lock you out of your own life. Love doesn't erase your name from every system that says you exist." I stopped the recording at exactly 10 minutes. The file saved to a folder on my desktop, OD23 affidavit final.mp4. An alert flashed across the screen, encrypted backup complete. The dead man's switch was set. If I didn't check in within 72 hours, it would send itself. To the press, to the state bar, to the Department of Health, to anyone who still thought guardianship was always benevolent. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Ramey had sent a voicemail. I pressed play. "She was at the nurse's desk 3 days before your stroke," he said. His voice was low, careful. "Didn't ask how you were doing, just wanted to know which forms could be signed by family if you were too overwhelmed to respond. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I do now." I sat back in the chair, my fingers curling loosely in my lap. Al had sent the physical copies by courier yesterday. Everything printed, labeled, filed into packets with no return address. One to the Columbus Dispatch, one to a legal aid organization, one to a small independent station known for covering corruption cases. He'd written me afterward, "Paper leaves a heavier footprint." I reopened the live stream just as Vanessa returned to the stage. She held a velvet folder against her chest like it was scripture. "We're doing our best," she said, "to love her through this." I hit mute. Her lips still moved, smiling that soft, delicate lie. The camera panned across the ballroom, people sipping from crystal, dabbing at the corners of their eyes like grief was contagious. This wasn't a fundraiser. It was a funeral for my name, a eulogy Vanessa was delivering while I was still alive. I turned away from the screen and reopened the file directory. The folder labeled Archive Legal Trigger sat at the bottom. I right-clicked and selected Schedule Drop. The system confirmed. Auto-send initiated if 3 check-ins were missed. Insurance. I returned to the live stream one last time. The camera zoomed out. A chandelier sparkled above the room, the same one I used to help polish before holidays when I still had a place at that table. Now it hung over strangers drinking to my disappearance. I turned on the webcam again. This time I didn't record a statement, just one sentence, just one truth. "You wanted silence. You built an empire on it. Now hear what it remembers." I closed the laptop and whispered to the dark, "You erased me, but I archived everything." The chandelier sparkled above her like forgiveness. I used to help polish it. Thanksgiving mornings, wedding receptions, the odd family gathering where we all pretended to like each other more than we did. Dad would hand me a folded rag and a step stool, and we'd reach up together side by side. Now, in the news clip on my screen, that same chandelier shimmered over a backdrop of evening gowns and damage control. Vanessa stood beneath it, giving her first interview since the Serenity Fund gala. "We love our sister and wish her peace," she said, hands clasped loosely in front of her. "This is a painful family matter. We hope the public will allow us space to heal." The reporter nodded sympathetically, as though it were just grief making her lie. But the screen split. On the other side, a headline burned into view. "Guardianship under question. Family fundraiser sparks legal scrutiny." Below it, grainy snapshots of documents appeared. A psychiatric evaluation dated 3 years after the physician's death. Signatures filed without witness verification. A will revision lacking probate. My Dropbox folder had gone live 48 hours ago. Al called it the fuse. "Quiet, but designed to travel," he said. I called it air, not revenge, not justice, just air. Because for months it felt like I'd been buried alive under someone else's version of me. Now truth was seeping in through the cracks. WLCN8 had been the first to run a segment. A clean 3-minute voiceover showing evidence I hadn't doctored, hadn't edited, hadn't even narrated. They let the documents speak, and they did. Vanessa's PR team released a statement that sounded like it had been dipped in honey and dried over ice. We ask for understanding and privacy during this time, but you don't get to disappear someone and then ask the world to look away. By the end of that week, the DOJ announced a preliminary inquiry into financial abuse under emergency medical guardianship. The morning after the announcement, Rami sent me an email from a burner address. Attached was his sworn affidavit. It read plainly, Lauren Chen was coherent, alert, and responsive. Her hospital file showed alterations made by outside parties. I witnessed an individual, Vanessa Chen, ask about legal forms before any decline in Lauren's condition was documented. Lauren was not delusional. She was lucid. They erased her anyway. I folded the printed copy and slid it into my expanding binder, right between forgery, POA, and medical record tampering. That binder had become its own story now, one where paper didn't lie. I remembered what Dad said once, flipping through an inspection report on the house. You're too sentimental to handle real estate. Paper matters. You get too attached. Maybe I did. But paper proved he was wrong and dead. That afternoon, my phone lit up. The number was blocked, but I knew the rhythm of Vanessa's voicemail tone before she even spoke. If you pull anything, she said, her voice stripped of warmth, I'll make sure you never see sunlight again. You don't want war with me. I didn't flinch. I hit save. Then I opened the evidence log on my laptop, added a new entry, verbal threat January 12, 2022, and uploaded the audio to the legal folder. Al responded within minutes. She just locked herself into our narrative. She's reacting. That's leverage. I exhaled. Not from fear, not from victory, but from certainty. The bowstring had snapped, and now the arrow was midair. By Thursday, the court docket updated. Hearing scheduled. Chen v. Chen. Petition to void guardianship. Subpoena issued. Vanessa Chen. I stared at the screen, not because I doubted it, but because I needed to see it written by someone other than me, someone who hadn't forgotten my name. I hadn't left the cabin in days, not even to walk the gravel path behind it. The snow had started to melt, but the wind still carried the memory of ice. I padded across the wood floors to the narrow bathroom tucked behind the kitchen. It had no mirror above the sink. I hadn't seen my reflection in weeks. But the medicine cabinet door was cracked. Inside, an old square of glass caught just enough light to offer me back a blurry version of myself. I stepped closer. My hair was longer than I remembered, my face thinner. The bruising under my eyes had faded, but not entirely, and yet there I was. You're not gone, I whispered. The woman in the glass didn't smile, but she didn't flinch either. They said I was unfit to speak for myself, but no one silenced me today. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish. Franklin County Courthouse always did, even when I was a kid tagging along on field trips, marveling at the solemnity. Now I was 34, standing under the same vaulted ceilings, only this time my voice didn't need permission. The snow clung to the edges of my blazer as I stepped onto the witness stand. I didn't brush it off. The manila folder in my hand felt heavier than it looked. The same hand that once trembled reaching for a hospital wall now lifted it without hesitation. I set it down with quiet certainty. Inside was my name, misspelled in forged documents, erased from property records, tied to diagnoses I never received. I was told I was confused, I said, calm and clear, that I imagined things, that I needed others to speak for me. But confusion doesn't forge signatures, and grief doesn't rewrite deeds. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat between two attorneys. Her hair was as perfect as always, makeup soft and careful, but her hands kept adjusting the hem of her blazer. Her gaze never fully met mine. Al presented the trail, one piece at a time. The power of attorney filed without a verified witness. The medical notes logged from outside the hospital system. The psychiatric assessment dated months after the doctor's death. The voicemail Vanessa left, her voice low and full of threat. Then came Ramey's affidavit. It was read aloud in its entirety. The courtroom held its breath. She was coherent, present. Her file showed edits made by an unauthorized party. Her sister asked about forms before any documented decline. Vanessa stood to respond. "We feared for her well-being," she said, voice catching just enough to sound unrehearsed. "Everything we did was out of love." The judge leaned forward. Love doesn't remove legal identity or file conservatorship using a backdated psychiatric form. A quiet murmur rose from the gallery. It didn't take long after that. The guardianship was declared void. My legal rights, my accounts, and my name restored. Vanessa was fined and referred for federal investigation. Her foundation's assets frozen pending audit. When I walked out of that courthouse, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt intact. Reporters crowded the steps, calling my name. I stopped for 1 second. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone," I said. "I came to reclaim what they buried." That night, back at the cabin, the fire crackled low, casting orange shadows across the wood floor. I sat in the same chair I'd used for weeks, the legal binder now closed and stored beneath my bed. The air was quieter than usual, or maybe it was just my breathing that had changed. A knock came at the door, soft, hesitant. A young woman stood on the porch, bundled in a green coat, cheeks pink from cold. "Miss Chen," she asked, "we were wondering, would you speak at our Elder Justice Summit?" I didn't pause. "That's why I'm still here," I said. Later, I folded a gray sweater into my suitcase. Then I picked up the name tag they'd sent in the mail. Simple white card, bold black font, Lauren Chen. No footnotes, no asterisks, just me. There's a quiet kind of justice in being seen again, not as a victim, but simply as myself. I didn't walk away with applause or headlines. I walked away with my name intact. Sometimes family doesn't fail us loudly. It fades, one form at a time, until you wonder if you imagined the love at all. But memory has edges, and truth has weight. And when we speak gently but clearly, even silence can't hold its power. If this story reminded you of a moment when you had to reclaim your voice, I'd be honored to hear it. Leave a note, share your thoughts, or simply carry the lesson forward. No one can erase who you are when you're ready to speak it aloud.